Hi, my name is Keith Major Jr. I am co-deputy chair of our firm's Maritime and Aviation Practice Group. I've been practicing law since 2014. I've joined Higgs Johnson in 2019, and we're here in the Bahamas. So I think that the answer is yes and no. I think, like many other jurisdictions, the Bahamas definitely had an adverse impact in terms of passenger travel, commercial travel during COVID-19. But then why I also say no is because I think about the legislative advances that we've had in Bahamian aviation locally. It's really developed a lot in the last few years. For example, in 2021, there are a suite of aviation-specific legislation, three of them in particular that were passed: the Civil Aviation Act 2021, Civil Aviation Authority Bahamas Act 2021, and the Bahamas Air Navigation Services Authority Act 2021. In addition to those three main pieces of aviation legislation, we've had the Aircraft Accident Investigation Regulations 2021. We've also seen the Bahamas move towards collecting overflight fees for its airspace, which is another remunerative advantage for the Bahamas. That also took place in 2021, still in COVID. And we've also included the airport that was in the Freeport, Grand Bahama, that was typically under the auspices of the Port Authority in Freeport. That's been moved over to the Airport Authority. But we have another piece of legislation, 2021. So although there's definitely the clear negative impact on the front end of COVID, I think while we're still in COVID, coming out of it, we saw a big progression in terms of the infrastructure for aviation and its growth coming out of COVID, for sure. One of the good things about those legislations that I spoke about is it really separated the aviation functions in separate autonomous organizations, which was really necessary to avoid conflict of interest and to ensure highest levels of safety. And so I think that's a good state of play for our aviation. In addition, we also have a airport public-private partnership project that's underway by the administration that's revitalizing and building new airports out throughout our archipelago of islands. It's a good thing and a good forecaster, indicator of good things to come in the sector, because it's going to expand the aviation reach and airlift capacity throughout the Bahamas. So when you look at the current state of play, I think it's a very good state of play. There's always room for improvement, and I'm happy about it. It has been a very busy time, as you've mentioned. But if I were to crystallize it, I think there are three that come to top of my mind. One being the Bahamas now collecting overflight fees of its airspace. That has been pegged, or I think the target that's been set for the Bahamas is 40 million in annual overflight fee collection, which is something that is significant when you think about the fact that those funds are going to be earmarked for use in the aviation sector, whether it be creation of infrastructure or securing talent to expand our capacity throughout the Bahamas. So I think that's got to be number one on my list. In addition to that, I think the fact that we have really sophisticated our legislative framework in the last few years, I think is a top achievement. We, due to our proximity and placement between North America and South America, I think there's a lot of untapped potential in terms of air service between those two big markets and generally the markets of the world, but in particular, given our proximity. A strong legislative framework, I think really helps and abodes for an ability to manage that that growth and success. And then thirdly, I think coming in third for me would have to be, and this is, I guess, a little personal, the introduction of the aircraft accident regulations. And that's because the Aircraft Accident Investigation Authority Act was passed in 2019, but the regulations weren't passed until 2 years later in 2021. And it happened to be passed when I had the great pleasure of serving as the deputy chairman of the Aircraft Accident Investigation Authority. So it was something we worked for, something we were very passionate about seeing. And I'm very happy to see that have happened in the last few years. I think those would be my top three. Where do we go from here, right? Yeah. I think the Bahamas has a great opportunity to match its development of its international or domestic legislation and its policy with its international aviation activity. What do I mean by that? There are a number of international aviation conventions or treaties or bilateral treaties that countries enter into for aviation, right? As you would appreciate, aviation by its nature is not only domestic but also international. And so many agreements are entered into. We've entered into some, but there's some that we haven't. So there's two that deals with passenger rights. That's the Warsaw Convention and the Montreal Convention. Warsaw Convention is ratified, it's here in the Bahamas. We signed on to the Montreal Convention, but we haven't ratified it. So it's a little bit of a gray area as to whether or not we want to stay with that or go with the Montreal Convention. I think we could work on that. That's part of the way forward. Also, in terms of international treaties, there's the Cape Town Convention, which deals with aircraft protocols for large movable objects and financing, right? And that's a very important piece of international treaty because it creates confidence in international lenders and financiers because it sets up a regime for default and how it is that lenders are going to be able to secure their assets if there was going to be a default by a borrower. The Bahamas, unfortunately, has not signed on to the 2001 Cape Town Convention as yet. And I think if we were to do that, it would inspire a lot of confidence in the market in terms of international lenders, financiers, and you may see a lot of that business moving to the Bahamas as well. We have a strong financial services industry, as you know, but I think that if we move in that direction, we will see a strengthening of that area. In addition to that, I think from a domestic standpoint, one of the things that has plagued our international aviation space for a long time is the practices called hacking, which is persons carrying persons for hire, but not being regulated to do so, and so therefore there's some big safety issues with that. It's cheaper, of course, and I think that a lot of persons are attracted to it because they can pay someone a smaller fee who's not properly regulated to give them an inter-island transport than the mainstream airlines would do so, right? So this is a financial aspect to it. But additionally too, because we're an archipelago, some of the islands, some of the far-flung islands don't have as frequent amount of airlift capacity as others. People need to move. And so you find that people put themselves, I think, in a little bit of a dangerous situation. And we've had some unfortunate aircraft accidents in the past where persons have been found to be taking persons for travel without proper regulation. We call it hacking. I think the way forward, I think if we could implement a program where we subsidize airlift through all of the parts of our archipelago, because it is unique, right? When you have an archipelago and you have to try and deal with airlift capacity throughout all parts of your island, I think that would be a great part of the way forward. And then I think if we're also talking about modernizing our airspace, we have to consider the role that commercial drone use will take place. We've seen a lot of the tech giants have revealed plans to introduce door-to-door delivery through the use of drones, but those require proper regulation, right? I think the FAA is still trying to fine-tune and tweak out how that's going to look, but I don't think that's very far away. And I think we're in the Bahamas. If we're going to maintain our space in that area, we have to look at how are we going to regulate. We have regulation with drones now, but how are we going to sufficiently regulate or roll out regulation for commercial drone use, especially for delivery? I've actually been around aviation my entire life. My grandfather, Eddie Major, is now deceased, and both my parents, Keith and Wendy Major, they're all air traffic controllers. So I literally grew up around the airport, Plains Aviation. I think that was the first bite at it, right? But as I matured, I took a personal interest in terms of it as a profession. I went to conferences, international aviation conferences, to meet people, network, and get a better understanding of it. It was still very nascent or in the infant stage in the Bahamas when I decided to pursue the specialty, but I saw that there was room for development. As I mentioned to you earlier in our discussion, just recently we've seen a lot of development in the legislation, and I think there's still some room to go. And I think it's good to be in an industry that is burgeoning and to kind of be on the curve of it. And so when I had to look about a specialty, and you consider, okay, there's actually an interest in the subject matter itself, there's some familiarity with the area, I'm a lawyer in any event, why not? And I thought it was a natural fit. You know, like I said, it is a very exciting time in aviation in the Bahamas, but just generally, it's a very dynamic area, internationally itself. I think that's one of the things that drew me to it and continues to draw me to it. There's always room for the top. That's what I would say. I remember those words when I was called to the bar. My presenter, the Honorable Dame Janet Bostwick, she said, you know, people always say there's too many lawyers. You know, why are people still pursuing that as a career? She said, but there's always room at the top. And that always stuck with me. And I don't know if it's a play on words, because obviously aviation is upwards, top. But there is always room at the top. And so anyone that's interested in it, even though you don't have to be an aviation lawyer, you could be an aviation practitioner, you could be in finance, insurance, aircraft, maintenance, brokerage. I mean, it is a wide open area. The fact that we've now moved towards collecting aircraft overflight fees, that has caused a stimulus in the area, and a lot of the areas that have lied dormant for such a long time, I think you'll see them come to the forefront and create even more job opportunities, for persons moving forward. So I say come in, there's always room for the top.